Hello, spice! It's the holiday season and spice everywhere there's spice. The German Pfeffernüsse gingerbread cookies are about as spicy as they get. I'm not referring to heat spice, but warm holiday sweet spice. These cookies are packed with 7 spices along with pepper and molasses for an added punch of flavor. Cover them in powdered sugar and your holiday plate will scream winter. While ginger originated in Asia, gingerbread and gingerbread type cookies were well in existence in Europe during the Middle Ages. Gingerbread is even mentioned in Shakespeare's 16th century play Love's Labour's Lost. Gingerbread ingredients vary all over the world, and even within one culture, a recipe can vary. I'm excited to share with you my spicy variation based on the German version. Let's check it out. For the ingredients, you'll need quite a few. All-purpose flour, baking soda, salt, ground black or white pepper, ground cinnamon, ground cloves, ground allspice, ground ginger, ground coriander, ground cardamom, ground nutmeg, butter, light brown sugar, molasses, whole milk, vanilla extract, and powdered sugar. To a medium bowl, we're going to add 270 grams, which is 2 1/4 cups of all-purpose flour, 2 grams, a half a teaspoon of baking soda, 1 1/2 grams, a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, a half a gram, a 1/4 teaspoon of freshly black ground pepper. You could use white. 5 grams, 2 teaspoons of ground cinnamon, 2 grams, 1 teaspoon of ground cloves, 1 gram, a half a teaspoon of ground allspice, 1 gram, a half a teaspoon of ground ginger, 1 gram, a half a teaspoon of ground coriander, 1 gram, a half a teaspoon of ground cardamom, and finally 1 gram, a half a teaspoon of ground nutmeg or grated nutmeg. Give your mixture a whisk or a stir until all of the ingredients are well dispersed and combined. And then set your dry mixture aside. To a large saucepan over the stove, you're going to add 113 grams, which is 1 stick of softened butter. And I did cut mine into chunks to make it easier and quicker to melt. And 162 grams, which is 3/4 cup packed light brown sugar, and 60 grams, which is a 1/4 cup of molasses. Heat the stove on medium heat to melt the butter and dissolve the sugar. Do not let the mixture boil. Stir frequently to prevent anything from burning. This process should only take a couple of minutes. As you can see, the butter is already starting to melt. It's almost all melted, and the sugar is slowly starting to dissolve. Once your butter is all melted, and the sugar is dissolving, but maybe not completely, then go ahead and add 60 milliliters, which is a 1/4 cup of milk. I'm using whole milk here, and 1 teaspoon of vanilla. Stir consistently during these 30 seconds so that your milk blends in with the rest of the ingredients. Now go ahead and turn off the heat and remove the saucepan from the heat. Add your flour and spice mixture, and you're going to stir it in well until there are no flour streaks remaining. Your dough will be sticky, but notice it is all blended in. Nothing appears to stand out in our mixture. We're going to let our dough sit for 20 to 30 minutes until the dough comes back down to room temperature. Remove the dough from your saucepan. You're going to roughly divide it in half. It is a moist dough, but it doesn't stick to your hands. And then just mound it each on a piece of plastic, just roughly half, and then just cover them each. We're going to place them in the fridge at least overnight for up to 3 days. Storing the dough in the fridge for hours allows time for the spices to melt together, producing a well-balanced spice cookie, and it firms the dough. Since it's really soft right now, we need to be able to shape it. So in the fridge it goes. Remove both dough halves from the fridge, set them on the counter. They may need a few minutes to warm up to room temperature so they can easily be manipulated. But then you're going to preheat your oven to 350 degrees, and you're going to line 2 large baking sheets with parchment paper or silicone mats for easy cleanup, and then set them aside. You can go ahead and place 1 dough half aside. Now, you can work with just 1 dough half today, and you can save the other one and put it in the fridge to work with tomorrow, to bake tomorrow or the next day, or put it in the freezer, and that way you just thaw it out overnight in the fridge when you're ready to bake them. So you can bake all holiday long. After making your dough, you just set the other half in the fridge, and then you've got cookies ready to be baked. So take one dough half, and I'm actually going to cut mine in half again just to make it easier to work with, and then just set that at the corner of my work surface. Now I'm going to start squeezing it and shaping it into a log. So we're going to roll this into a 3/4 to 1 inch thick log. And you're using an unfloured work surface because we need the resistance from the surface to help us roll the dough. Okay, that's about the size I'm looking for. So I have a little bench scraper here that has 1 inch in measurements as well as centimeters. So I like to use that as my guide. Then I just take a knife and I cut about every inch. And you can make these a little bit smaller if you want. The inch works for me. So these are about the easiest cookies to make after you actually get through the mixing process, because you don't have to do any like rolling like you would sugar cookies. Okay, so then you have these little miniature logs here. They just roll each into a ball. You could do it on your surface, in your hands. And try not to leave any indentions. If you do, those indentions will show up during the baking process. So a nice round ball, place each on a cookie sheet. These need to be 2 inches apart because they will flatten and spread in the oven. Okay, and then you just continue doing this with all of them. This can happen very quickly. I love this cookie dough. I love how dark brown it is with all those spices, molasses, brown sugar. It just really darkens this dough. Once you have one pan filled, you're going to place the cookies in the oven. You're going to bake 13 to 15 minutes until the cookies are set and dark brown. While one pan of cookies bakes, go ahead and cut out the remaining cookies from the dough that you're working from, and then move on to the next half of that dough unless you want to save that for another day. I have one batch of cookies coming out of the oven and another batch of cookies going in the oven. We're going to let this batch of cookies cool 2 minutes on their pan. They're still warm, but we're going to go ahead and move them over to a cooling rack to cool. So I baked my cookies at 14 minutes, nice and brown at the top, a little bit darker at the bottom. And we're going to let these continue to cool. There are 2 ways I'm going to show you how to add the finishing touches to these cookies. The first is the easiest way to add decor. While the cookies are still warm, this is after about 10 minutes of being out of the oven, so mine are still warm, others are in the oven. You're going to take a large zip top bag. We're going to add, since I'm only going to do about half a batch here, because I'm going to show you another method with the other half, is we're going to use 120 grams of powdered sugar. If you're doing all the cookies this way, you'll use 240 grams. That's 2 cups. Here we just have 1 cup. So a full batch is 2 cups. But you're going to add your powdered sugar to the zip top bag. Take a few of your warm cookies. Yeah, that's probably good enough for now. Zip up the top. Squeeze the top so that you have a nice sort of a balloon ball going on here, and then just shake, 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 shake. And all you're doing is dispersing the powdered sugar around each cookie and all of their open spaces. So it's going to be just a beautiful white snow-covered cookie. Perfect for winter, right? Okay, after you shake a few times, then remove your cookies and put them back on your cooling rack so they can continue to cool completely. And notice I have my cooling rack sitting on top of a baking sheet so that if any powdered sugar falls off, it's going on the baking sheet, not the table, counter, or the floor. And I'm just sort of knocking the cookies against the bottom of the bag just to release any loose powdered sugar that might be on them. And then you just keep adding another 5 or 6, and you just repeat. This is the easiest way to get pretty cookies with little effort. The second way that we can decorate our cookies, still easy but a little bit more involved, and that's with a powdered sugar glaze. So the cookies need to be cooled completely before we cover them for this method. To a small or medium bowl, we're going to add 120 grams of powdered sugar. If I were making a full batch, I would use 240 grams, which is 2 cups. So I'm using 1 cup here because I used 1 cup for the other half of the cookies. And so this one is going to be about the same. And then we're going to add 1 tablespoon of milk first. And then we're gonna stir it and see what the consistency looks like. So you're just gonna add probably no more than 2 tablespoons with 1 cup, 4 tablespoons with 2 cups. But we're looking for a glaze. We want it thick enough to adhere to the cookies, but not so thick that we have this thick glaze on there. And we also need to make sure it's thin enough that it sticks to the cookies but doesn't fall off. You could actually use water here. I've used water and it's fine too. All right, so I'm stirring with this fork just to make sure it gets all smoothed out. Okay, and that's sort of what consistency we're looking at right now. That was 2 tablespoons of milk, but you can decide as you're working through this. All right, so you're gonna take 1 cooled cookie. You're just gonna put it in your glaze. You can flip it over. Just make sure it gets covered. Okay, you might want 2 forks if need be. Lift up the cookie from the glaze. Let it drip off any excess glaze. I like to just rub my fork along the bottom of my bowl there. And then you just place it back on the cookie sheet. Some glaze will ooze off of the cookie. That's expected, but hopefully it's not too much. We want to be able to see the glaze on the cookie. So again, flip it over a couple times. Let it drain off excess glaze. Rub it along the bowl, always works for me. And then gently place it on your cookie rack. And you're actually going to get 2 different textures with this cookie with the exterior, so you may prefer one over the other. We have our powdered sugar dusted cookies, our iced or glazed cookies, and then I left a couple plain so you could see what they look like in their different states, right? So let's take a look at an unfinished cookie here. Although they look fine just as they are, so you could serve it like this. Notice it's evenly brown, top and bottom, a little bit darker on the bottoms. They're definitely were cooked for a bit. So let's break into one. Soft center. They have a little bit of height to them, so they're not a flat cookie. And that's it, it's full of spice here. So then of course the ones that are covered in powdered sugar glaze or otherwise are gonna add sweetness to the cookie as well as visual appeal for the holiday season. When I look at these dark cookies, I automatically expect to have a punch of flavor. And I do. Oh, there's a lot of depth in that. The molasses is clear. You're getting it from the molasses and from the dark brown sugar because dark brown sugar has molasses in it as well. Wow, and those spices like the cloves and the allspice and the cinnamon and the ginger. It's all well balanced. Definitely a nice sugary spiced cookie. Okay, I'm gonna take a little bite into the powdered sugar one so you can see what that looks like. It almost reminds me of eating a powdered sugar donut, but with a bunch of spice. Okay, and the last one, let's try one of these iced ones. And I think they're pretty. They're not quite as white as a powdered sugar one. But what's interesting about these, it has a thin exterior crunch to it from the glaze that has hardened. So that's an interesting texture. It's different from the powdered sugar. They both taste very good. You can of course taste the powdered sugar in both of them. So plain is good, but powdered sugar and glazed are even better. These store very well at room temperature as the flavors actually improve over time. So keep these in a pantry until you need to give a gift or treat an unexpected guest during the holidays. Thank you for watching, liking, and subscribing. It's cookie time, so go bake some holiday Pfeffernüsse cookies and continue baking the world.